Okay, I think we can start at least with sort of the administrative things. Welcome everyone to our next expert exchange on sustainability by design, an assessment tool for just energy transition plans. My name is Katarina. I'm a policy advisor in the IESR project based in Brussels, and I'll have the pleasure to moderate you through this event today. Just some things at the start. We have translation available in case you need it or you would like to access it. We translate into Bahasa Indonesia, Thai, Mongolian, and Vietnamese. If I'm not mistaken, you might have to choose a different language for Mongolian, as unfortunately MS Teams doesn't allow to choose Mongolian as a language. So I think, if I'm not mistaken, you might have to choose Norwegian. Sorry for that. There's unfortunately no way that we've so far been able to select Mongolian as a language. Here you can see on the slides how you access the interpretation. When you join, you should be seeing a little window pop up that says choose language. If you do, then please click on it and you can choose the language that you need. If you don't, there's a way to manually access it, and that is through the three dots on the right upper corner on Teams. You can choose language and speech, and then again, choose the language that you would like to have interpretation into. And you can also choose to translate the slides. You should see this on the bottom here, then choose translate the slides. And then I think there should be a transcript available as well. If there are any problems, let us know in the chat. I have my colleague Adriana, who's supporting technically today. And then I think we can already get into it. We have an exciting program planned for today. It's a bit different from our usual formats because we will hear about a tool on just energy transition plans and how you can assess them. And we'll first hear a little bit about the original tool from the European context. We'll hear from Max Bird, who will give us an insight into lessons learned from assessing just energy transition plans in the European Union. Then my colleague Martin Keim, he will introduce a bit the rationale and the targeted groups and the audience for this tool. We'll hear from Patrick Bücker, also a colleague from GIZ, who will explain the principles and the indicators behind the tool, because him and Martin were highly involved in that. And then we'll have a quick Q&A with the two of them. And finally, we'll hear from Julius Adiatma from the Institute for Essential Services Reform from Indonesia, a little bit about learnings from South Africa, Indonesia, and Vietnam, specifically on the just energy transition partnerships and the plans and the planning that was involved here. Now I would like to hand over to my project director, Philip Schattenmann, for some words of welcome. Philip, the stage is yours.
Can you hear me? Perfect. Good morning, everyone, or already good evening, depending where you connect yourself. A warm welcome on behalf of the IESR Consortium to today's edition of our Expert Exchange. My name is Philip Schattenmann. I'm Project Director of IESR, and as you may know, IESR is the acronym for Innovations Regions for Just Energy Transition. This is a project which is jointly funded by the German Federal Ministry of Economic Affairs and Climate Action and by the European Commission's Directorate General for International Partnerships. IESR is implemented by a consortium of 5 partners. Besides GIZ, consortium partners are the Climate Action Network, the International Institute for Sustainable Development, the ILO, the International Labour Organization, and the Wuppertal Institute. Our aim is to support and accelerate just energy transitions away from coal to renewable energies and other sustainable economic activities. And one key aspect here of our work is to provide spaces to bring together different perspective, share experience and real stories, and search for effective tools and solutions, which brings me back to our today's expert exchange, being the expert exchange series, one of the formats we facilitate. Today it's about sustainability by design and just energy transition plans. We all know that it's a complex undertaking for policymakers to design measures that strive to both grow and decarbonize the economy, and that in an equitable manner. And we all know that adequate planning for this is key. However, it's easy to say, but hard to do so. So today's session aims at providing some concrete ideas, and more so, a tool now for policymakers that helps them to come up with good planning for JET measures and can be used to assess their existing plans, but also guide when it comes to new planning cycles by providing a structure with key elements. Patrick and Martin will take us on a deep dive into this tool in a minute and show all its possibilities and features. Just before I hand over, I would like to highlight that the genesis of this tool, as it will be presented today, is a great example for a good collaboration between different actors internationally. Originally, as you said, Katharina, it was created by WWF, by our colleagues, then further developed now, led by GIZ for a different set of contexts. It then underwent peer review by experts working on just energy transition within and outside of GIZ, different countries from Ukraine, Indonesia, India, South Africa, Chile, Colombia, and the EU. And I would like to thank all those individuals and officials who participated and provided inputs and comments. This includes, I'd like to mention them, PPCA, Just Transition Expert Group, with support by Helena Gray, Marlista Citraningrum and Julius Adhyatma, who was already mentioned, speaker at our expert exchange today from the IESR, Laura Fletchers and Giovanni Pavon Restrepo from Transforma, from Colombia, and Andrea Varas from the Ministry of Energy of the Government of Chile. Last but not least, many thanks to all our colleagues from GIZ involved, and especially to Patrick Büker and Martin Keim, who will present the tool today. We are highly interested to keep this momentum up, because this is now kind of a milestone we have achieved, but I guess that using the tool will provide ever more inputs and experience that can further develop it. And having said this, first of all, I wish all of us a productive session now and lively discussion, and I hand over to Katharina.
Thank you so much, Philip. That brings me already to the next part, to our wonderful speakers today. I would quickly like to introduce you so you know who's going to speak to you. First of all, there's Max Bird, who's a senior policy officer for just transition within the climate energy team in WWF in the European Policy Office. She holds a postgraduate certificate in climate change and energy from the University of Antwerp and an MSc in development management from the London School of Economics, and previously worked in the humanitarian aid sector. We're joined by Patrick Büker, who's a planning officer in the sectoral department of GIZ in Germany. He's been working in the field of environmental protection and climate change mitigation for more than 25 years. And specific areas of interest of his and also areas of expertise are environmental impact assessments, just transition concepts, mitigation of greenhouse gases, and air quality management. He's also worked extensively on these topics in developing countries and emerging economies. And before joining GIZ in 2018, he worked for 15 years as a senior researcher for the Stockholm Environmental Institute at its office at the University of York. And then Julius Adhyatma, who is a senior analyst in the IESR. He has a chemical engineering background and was initially responsible more for clean fuel research, such as biofuel and hydrogen, and lately is more involved in just transition in cold regions. So, no further ado, I'd like to start and hand over to our first speaker, Max. Please go ahead. You're muted still, Max.
Apologies, can you hear me now? Great, thank
you.
And
perfect, thank you.
Thank you for inviting me to participate this morning and for the great collaboration. It's very exciting to see the development of this tool and its potential in many other areas going forward. So thank you for that. I'm going to speak very briefly about our experience within the European Union, looking at just transition plans and the background against which we developed our original tool for assessing European just transition plans and some of the learnings from that. So on the next slide, you'll see the overview of what we call the Green Deal. Are we able to change a slide? Yes, perfectly. Which some of you may already be familiar with, which is the sort of legislative framework, the package that the EU has been basing its path towards climate neutrality around for the last 5 years. So the European Green Deal was launched around 5 years ago now. You'll see the overarching framework includes many sectors, so climate and energy, transport, buildings, and importantly, as you see there, there's one part of the picture which is called ensuring a just transition for all. So the idea was that on the journey towards becoming a climate neutral continent, it was very important to have specific measures to ensure that, as we like to say, no one was being left behind. So under this part of the programme, one of the key flagship measures which was developed was the EU Just Transition Mechanism. And the details of how this works are not so important for this discussion. But you can see it's a mechanism which includes both a core fund, what we call the Just Transition Fund, and then some additional pillars. InvestEU, this is a sort of budgetary guarantee scheme, and then there's a loan facility which actually combines grants with loans from the European Investment Bank in order to mobilise public investment in the just transition. But the important things to understand here is that in order to access this mechanism and get support through this fund, every country, member states, had to develop a territorial just transition plan. And so on the next slide, we can see the territories in Europe where these plans have been developed for and where the mechanism applies. So you'll notice straight away that this is a regionally targeted initiative. So it's the territorial just transition plans. I'll just talk about transition plans, but we call them TJTPs if you want to see the acronym. They are targeted at the regions which are the most challenged in the transition. So the idea is to put specific support into regions which need to transition most urgently. So obviously some of the coal regions, mining regions, some areas which may traditionally have been economically based around peat extraction, also oil shale, but in some countries, simply areas which have a very highly intensive carbon industry that also needs a rapid and massive shift. And the idea was to support those regions where this was going to have a major social and economic impact on the population, on the jobs, and support that process of both moving to more low carbon options and ensuring social economic well-being, economic diversification. So you'll see on the slide there that this came into force in July 2021. And the regulation set out if you like, the template for these plans, the transition plans, which would be a prerequisite for accessing this support. Now, WWF was very interested in climate and energy issues, in coal phase out, and our understanding of a just transition I've put some key bullets on the next slide, is that a just transition should be fair. So fair socially. The people who have done the least to create this climate crisis that we find ourselves in should not be the people who are burdened with, if you like, the extra effort of overcoming the challenge. Rapid is important for us. We need ambition. We need it to happen fast. We need to be aligned with the Paris Agreement. Our understanding of just transition is that also our just transition planning has to be part of a wide strategy encompassing the energy transition, cleaner versions of our economic systems, and while obviously safeguarding nature and the environment. It needs to be planned and implemented early. We know we've got a problem. It's not fair. It's not just if we're pushing it down the line. And extremely importantly, it needs to be very inclusive. This is complicated stuff. It involves the whole of our society. So we need meaningful stakeholder participation from all parts of the policy actor network, from civil society, from the trade unions, from citizens to go forward. So based on our understanding of what a just transition involves, we developed a set of principles that we wanted to see within these just transition plans that were being made all over Europe. And you can see those there on the screen. They reflect the understanding that we have around what a just transition is. I'm not going to go through all of them. They will look more familiar also by hopefully the end of this webinar. Many of them have been carried through into the updated tool for international use. But just to say that from these principles, then we went through the process of developing indicators of what those principles might look like in practice. And we developed a traffic light system for scoring those indicators so that we could pick up a just transition plan and score it against a common system of indicators, regardless of which country it came from. I wanted to highlight that very important to us was the fact that this process of scoring, rating these and analysing these plans, it was very important for us that this was a participatory process. It wasn't just WWF sitting in a corner with our notebook. We involved many civil society colleagues. We interacted with the policymakers making the plans so they could see also where our principles and our indicators, our key issues were. We also participated with think tanks and research institutes as this group of plans were being developed. And the results, after drafts and final versions, the result was an overview of plans, which again we could score on a common framework and show where were the strengths and where were the weaknesses of a transition plan in different regions and different countries. So on the next slide, you see one of the overviews that we were able then to put in a report. The idea wasn't really to name and shame. The idea was really to be able to find areas that were really good and be able to support that. Areas where maybe more work could be needed, and we needed really to pay attention as that transition plan went forward, but also to look, if you like, for common areas where there may be possibility to do some work together, or where we needed to have a broader approach in terms of our advice and messaging in general, where it was challenging across the whole set of plans. So there you see the scoring against the different principles. We also had a numerical system which enabled us to go into a little bit more detail on that. So overall, the scorecard approach enabled us to have a framework for discussion. There's a few points on the next slide, just in terms of our conclusions. I'm coming towards the end of this very brief presentation. It provided a framework for discussion which is really rooted in our key principles that we were looking for. And it enabled a comparison. So you could look at plans against each other in order to encourage ambition and to pull things forward. It gave recognition to the positive points while highlighting areas where we maybe needed to look together for better solutions. And as I said, it looked at common areas of difficulty. Just in terms of very high level, some of the findings that we found as we looked across this range of plans was that the just transition plans in Europe for all these regions tended to focus very much on the economic and technological investments and on workforce skills, and found difficulty looking at wider impact on society. So that was obviously challenging, both in terms of how countries were used to plan and in terms of the people that were enabled to get into the room together. We found that there was quite a high level of climate ambition in the transition plans, but still not quite enough to get us where we needed. And we found that the plans lacked an awareness or a recognition of some of the existing inequalities in our society, and therefore maybe missed an opportunity to link sustainable economy and social goals. So these are elements that we're obviously continuing to look at very much as we go forward. We also found that the overall process of planning and developing plans could have been more participatory and more transparent for a greater effectiveness. So 1 year on, and this is now my last slide, we're now monitoring the implementation of the transition plans. So most of them have been in action for a year to a year and a half now. And the framework that we have established is still extremely useful, again, to have a common framework for discussion, to see the results coming through, especially for those areas where we knew that they were particularly challenging or weak in some areas. And so there will be a midterm review of the Just Transition Fund. And again, this is a useful opportunity for us to again use our tool and see how far the implementation is getting to meet the principles and indicators established. At the moment in Europe, we're in a process of updating national energy and climate plans in each member state, so country level, not the regional level ones. And again, this assessment experience, we feed into that. It's very useful. There are many similarities in terms of challenges in the process, deciding within the plans where the trade-offs are, how we articulate our principles through into a national level plan. And obviously very important to keep an eye on the coherence and to see that the national level plans are coherent with the regional plans that are already underway, and in which in some cases are actually more ambitious than the national plan. So we hope that some of these regional transition plans can also be used to, if you like, pull things forward and increase ambition on a national level. I'm going to stop there. I will put in the chat a couple of links if you're interested to see our report on the comparison between regional transition plans in Europe, and I'm very open to any questions. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Mags. There's already one question that I see in the chat, and I'll take it because I think it's very directly regarding your tool. The question is, when it comes to scoring cards and indicators, have you used any weighting of individual indicators to inform regions on what specific areas are to prioritize?
That's a difficult question to get into without going into the nitty-gritty calculation of how we scored everything. I think no is the quick answer, but I will put a link in and you can see, if you like, the mechanics of the scoring in one of our background documents. I think overall the balance was achieved by the way we formulated the principles and the indicators, so they brought through, if you like, strongly the things that we're interested in. Within those, then yes, you see it's important to have all the different areas covered, and then you can see whether each of them are green, yellow, read. But no, we didn't do a lot of, 80% on climate ambition and 20% on skills or anything like that. It was more across the board. But I will put a link in the chat.
Perfect. Thank you so much. In case anybody has more questions, please feel free to use the Q&A. If you click again on the three dots on the top on more, then you see the Q&A as one of the first things to pop up. So please put your questions there, and then we collect them to ask again later. And now I'd like to hand over to my colleague Martin to explain a little bit sort of the bridge between the WWF tool and the GIZ tool. Martin, please, the stage is yours.
Thank you very much, Katharina. Thanks a lot, Max, also for this very interesting introduction on the WWF tool and the excellent collaboration on the developed tool that we are now about to present. So let's dive right into why we are here today in terms of the adapted tool. Next slide, please. As you saw with the WWF tool as a starting point, we as an organization that is GIZ looked at basically what kind of strengths does the tool have, and how can we use that tool to use it for our projects, our work streams that we are active in globally. So I think that is important to understand as a starting point. It is essentially a tool that provides climate and environmental safeguards, and that is important, of course, for all our projects when it comes to climate policy projects, energy policy projects, and of course, in our case, a just energy transition project in general. And as Philip said in the introduction, the key rationale for having the tool for our project is, of course, to support policymakers in devising a JET plan, and also to support them when it comes to revising a existing plan. So if you go on the next slide, you could basically narrow it down to three main points that we wanted to, three objectives, if you will, that we wanted to achieve with the adoption and the development of the now published new assessment tool. The first one is to enable planning that is sustainable consistently throughout a just energy transition plan on an international level. And the reason why we put the emphasis on international is, of course, that as you see, the EU process when it comes to just energy transition planning and policy making is very streamlined and very institutionalized. So for us, the idea was to have a tool that is adapted to an international use case, which also leads the bridge to basically the second point. The EU level tool, the WWF tool, is focusing on, of course, a very specific set of countries, whereas our countries that we're working in the project are low and middle income countries with specific economic bases, with coal as, of course, often being the core of their economic activities, and the dependencies on other, for instance, raw material uses being quite high, with a number of specific aspects. And so one of the important points we wanted to achieve with our peer review was to really adapt the tool to the context of low and middle income countries. What is important for them when it comes to sustainability and just energy transition planning. And this is why, and that's the third point, we wanted to achieve in discussion with our projects in the countries that have been mentioned by Philip in the beginning. We wanted to achieve a consolidated version of criteria, of internationally recognized criteria that have been undergoing a peer review, and that could serve as a system that could give an indication and a help to policymakers. So essentially, The tool that you will see now is a bit broader in its scope since it's international, and it is more indicative, as you will just see now with the traffic light system in a minute. So just to give you a quick snapshot of what the tool looks like, if you go to the next slide, please. So the tool is essentially 11 core principles. And these principles, I give you an example here, are a bit like a compass. They intend to give you a direction if you are, for instance, a policymaker, and this could be in the case, for instance, for countries with a just energy transition partnership, trying to make investment plans and to devise what is a sustainable investment plans. But it could also go to countries which are looking at regional development plans for regions that are highly dependent on fossil fuels, or in this case coal, and look at the regional level. So the scope of the tool is broader, and you will see that every core principle, in this case principle 8, has indicators, 8.1, 8.2, etc. And with those indicators, next slide, please. With those core principles and indicators, you will see that left-hand side now shows an indicator, and the right-hand side shows a traffic light. And so this means the extent to which an indicator is fulfilled will be shown by the right-hand side. So we will often see a system of an indicator actually being not fulfilled, which would be a red light, a yellow light for an indicator that is partially fulfilled. For instance, if there's a general goal but no timeline, no concrete objectives fixed, and a green light if an indicator is not only fulfilled but is concretely planned in terms of timeline, concrete objectives, responsibilities. So that's the general system. And now last slide, I think, to just give you a quick wrap up of where we want to go with this tool. Basically two things. Policymakers can use this tool to assess existing just energy transition plans and to devise new ones. This is I guess the main aim for our tool. It's to make sure that if policymakers want to assess their plans, they have an orientation that is based on a benchmark that is internationally recognized. And of course, the second aim is to go beyond that and to look at stakeholders that are directly affected by a just energy transition, who can also use this tool to look at existing just energy transition plans and assess whether they are actually sustainable. This can help to, of course, then in the next step foster a broader discussion and to engage stakeholders to be active if they perceive a just energy transition plan is lacking specific elements. And with that being said, I'm very happy to hand over back to Katharina and Patrick to guide us through the tool. Thank you.
Thank you, Martin. And I'll directly go over to Patrick because we're a tiny bit behind schedule. So please go ahead.
Okay, can you hear me? Yes, right. Okay, very warm welcome as well from my side. I'm as well excited now to be able to demonstrate to you the assessment tool, or to present to you the assessment tool for just energy transition plans. You can go already to the next slide, please. So we, a group of GIZ colleagues from different disciplines and as well external partners, Philip already mentioned them. We started with this assessment tool by having a closer look at the WWF tool Max already presented. And we had to make sure that we account for the needs of our partner countries. So mainly talking about developing nations and emerging economies. And obviously, they have different needs than European Union countries or European countries. Hence, the new definition, at least partly, new definitions of core principles. So together with this kind of team of experts, we defined 11 core principles. These principles cover different environmental, social, and economic aspects. These principles come with indicators, Martin already mentioned them, and as well with evaluation criteria for the different traffic light colors. I have to warn you, this presentation will be a little bit wordy at times. Unfortunately, I think this is necessary because this is what happens if you present a tool that is very much based on different criteria, but I will try to make it as exciting as possible. And I would like you to put yourself first into the position of a policymaker of a just energy transition region. So let's imagine you are a policymaker in a heavily coal-based region in central India, for example, and you either have the task now to come up with a new concept, obviously not you alone, but with a team of colleagues, a new concept and experts, a new concept for a just energy transition plan, or you have been provided with a first version of just energy transition plan and you would like to see how well it fits as well with let's say the reality on the ground. So what I will do now, I will go through the 11 principles one by one, but only for the first principle, I will actually go into the depth of the indicators and as well the associated traffic light colors. For the following 10 principles, we will provide you with a document, which I believe has been launched today officially as well. So you will get the link later on. There you can actually look into the different evaluation criteria for the different indicators of all 11 principles. So if you carry on now, please, next slide. And the next one as well. So I will start with principle 1. So the principle 1 states that the JET plan should make a strong and decisive commitment to the Paris Agreement. So really to cut greenhouse gases or greenhouse gas emissions quickly, focusing on, for example, CO2 and methane. There are 3 indicators associated with this principle. One is really about the alignment with the commitment to cut these emissions quickly. The second one is the transition from a fossil fuel to a renewables-based energy system in the region. So, for example, in your Indian just energy transition region. And the third one is to improve or include proposals to increase energy efficiency and to reduce energy demand in the region. The next slide, please. So if we now look into the kind of traffic light system, and the next one as well, please, of indicator 1. These are, if you show all 3 of them together, please. Yes, that's great. Oh, it should be, it should be green. I don't know why it comes out at yellow, sorry, or orange, but it was green this morning. So just imagine it's green. So, so the evaluation criteria really range from and I read out what we have in case of a red traffic light. So there is some indication of commitment to the greenhouse gas to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, but without defined timeline and percentage reduction, or there is not even any indication for the need of reduction of greenhouse gas emissions. And it is below the ambition of a country-specific NDCs and long-term strategies. And this would be the worst category. The best one in this case would be the green one, orange here, which indicates a strong and decisive commitment that is at least in line or above the current country-specific NDCs and or long-term strategies ambition with concrete stepwise action plan. So we need a definition of milestones there, how to achieve NDCs and or long-term strategies by a certain date, and how to monitor progress towards this achievement. So this is the range for indicator 1. If you now carry on to indicator 2 of principle 1 and the next slide as well, please. Okay, and there I mentioned before, this is about the transition from a fossil fuel to a renewables-based energy system. So there, the range would be from the worst, which is the red one, if you could, okay. So this would be, there is no recognition of opportunities to increase renewable energy use nationally or in the region, including the improvement of the respective infrastructure. 2, which is green now, which is great, it contributes to ambitious national and regional renewable energy targets and or supports the development for a full plan for a transition to energy generation from renewable sources, including the improvement of the respective technical, financial, and administrative infrastructure. And specific action and projects are proposed for the near, mid, and long term, clearly distinguished, including progress monitoring towards the achievement of these targets and plans. You can see really how much more advanced this is in comparison to the red light. If we then go to indicator 3 of principle 1, which is really to increase as well the energy efficiency and to reduce the energy demand, there we have the range from the red light does not recognize the opportunities to increase energy efficiency and reduce energy used, to the green light contributes to ambitious national regional energy efficiency and energy saving targets and plans, and specific actions and projects for better energy efficiency and reduced energy demand are proposed for the near, mid, and long term, clearly distinguished between these 3 steps as well. So you can see here, and I wanted to read this out once for one principle. You can see here really the range this tool offers. It gives policymakers the chance to really check where they are. The accompanying document, you could call it maybe a manual, that has been published today gives you a bit more context for the different evaluation criteria. So this is really helpful as well, I guess, for users to use the tool. So now I'm going through the next 10 indicators we have identified. So if you go to the next slide, please. The next 10 principles. The second principle is about the prevention of prolonged fossil fuel use and delay of transition to climate neutrality. So this is really about, and if I go through the indicators, it's about cessation of fossil fuel subsidies. It is, Max mentioned that as well earlier, it's about the phase out of coal mining and coal combustion. The third indicator is phase out of other fossil fuels like fossil gas, oil shale, non-renewable biomass, peat, and other non-renewables. And the fourth one is specifically on the exclusion of new infrastructure investment into new fossil fuels. If you then go to principle 3, please, which aims for sustainable economic diversification at different levels. So there you can see that we now switch from the more kind of climate aspect to a kind of social economic workforce aspect now. So indicator 1 to 3 are focusing on really the encouragement of sustainable economic diversification. based on good analyses. So really trying to make sure that you account, if you think about setting up new jobs, you account for new sectors to come into the region, especially in terms of, for example, renewables as well, to really make sure that the region can provide jobs for the people who live there, for example, and that India region I mentioned before, which might be at the moment still very much coal-based, they need a diversification of the job market there. The second indicator would be to specifically support small and medium enterprises and startups. We know that this is very important to actually diversify and to set up a new labor market. And the third one is really about making sure that the investment planning is in line with national energy, climate, and transition plans. If we then go to principle 4, please. There we have a rather important principle on the adaptation of the education and training to transition plans. So again, we have to make sure that education and training is accounting for the new realities that will come up, including as well new job markets. So it's very important, and that is indicator 1, that we first do a very good gap analysis of upskilling, reskilling, and education gaps, really. So what is needed in the region to make sure that everyone will find a job in the future. And the second indicator is then to identify measures to address upskilling, reskilling, and education gaps in the region. So can you make sure that the JET Energy Transition Plan accounts for the changed education and training to make sure that you have the workforce you will need for the new job market in the region? So that is really about this indicator. If you then go to principle 5, please. This is really about, it's a very important social principle. It's about addressing social inequalities and potentially affected human rights. And there we have the first indicator, which really focuses on the equality of opportunity and employment support. If you think about the India region I mentioned earlier, you will have the challenge, for example, there that you will have formal and informal workers. So you have to make sure that you provide employment opportunity for all of these. The second indicator would be inclusion of measures and indicators to ensure the quality of jobs. So this is really about sustainable job creation. So make sure that the workforce will be earning money in not only short term as well mid and long term. Then the third indicator is about measures addressing existing and potential inequalities. And some of these measures could, for example, include minimum wage, the elimination of child labor, setting up pension system, or transparent land ownership, for example. Indicator 4 is analysis of effects on human rights. These could be in the economic, social, cultural, civil, and political field. And indicator 5 is the securement of quality of life. We identified criteria here: good health, education, environmental quality, personal security, civic engagement, and work-life balance. Okay, then we come to principle 6, please. This is about gender equality, to address women's and girls' rights in the transition region and as well in the transition plans. So the first indicator is on gender equality and women's rights per se, or concretely. And there we focus on perspectives from a legal, political, economic, social, and cultural point of view. And the second indicator is again linked to employment, the diversification of the the employment, and making sure that job opportunities are created specifically for women and girls. There's as well a close link to the education principle I mentioned earlier, and to as well screen the Just Energy Transition Plan for the prevention of systemic discrimination of women and girls through the labor market, and as well education plans, for example. Very important principle. It would be very important, for example, as well for the India region I mentioned earlier. If we then come to principle 7, please. This is now an environmental principle, so it addresses environmental, climate, human health, and cultural safeguards across all objectives. It's not only environmental, but it's mainly environmental. We have 5 indicators here. The first one is really to make sure that no investment, and I'm talking about investment in infrastructure, for example, really in new jobs. So no investment will be made that could harm human health, climate, and biodiversity objectives. So you wouldn't, for example, set up a large chemical factory and log an entire forest for it, for example. The second one would be to improvement of environmental quality and biodiversity in the region. So we want to make sure that all environmental aspects and biodiversity is protected in the region and can be even potentially be supported in the region with a new Just Energy Transition Plan. The third indicator is to make sure that the environmental legacies of coal mining or coal-based power generation and other fossil fuel use will be abated. So this is a rather important indicator, and one of the main challenges, I would argue, of a lot of Just Energy Transition regions. So you have, toxic water bodies, you have sludges, you have a lot of really dirty material contaminating land, for example, or soil, I should say, contaminating as well the air. So you have to make sure that you come up with some principles how to prevent this and how to make sure that you actually remediate the region. You regenerate it. I've seen it in India, for example, that some of these regions actually use, for example, areas where they mined coal in the past for kind of recreational purposes now. The fourth indicator is promotion of circular economy and waste reduction. This really helps a lot to actually make sure that you have a sustainable economic system in the region that is not putting any strain on ecosystems and their services. And the fourth one is exclusion of investment in measures which could harm cultural or heritage assets. So there, for example, thinking about religious buildings, for example, temples and so on. So make sure, or even certain forest or single trees that are of high importance for the local communities, that you do not harm them by introducing a new Just Energy Transition region. Okay, now we come to principle 8, please. This is about identifying public and private funding sources for the Just Energy Transition and how to leverage and manage them. We have 2 indicators. The first one is identification of domestic Just Energy Transition funding sources and setting up a respective finance plan. And the second one is very similar, but they're really looking into international funding sources. And again, setting up a respective finance plan. These are very important indicators as well. You often have that those companies, often state-run, that have actually polluted the region, that they do finance at least part of the just energy transition, but not entirely. So you will need additional finances, either local or international, and this principle is accounting for finding these finances and for checking that you have actually you've taken into account this rather important finance aspect. If we then come to principle 9, please. Okay, this is about governance of the development and implementation of the plan, and to make sure that it's coherent with respective policies. So we need indicator 1, we need to make sure that the governance mechanism is transparent. The second indicator is any policymaker has to make sure that the JET plan is coherent with the energy transition plan. If it's not, then you have a major problem. The third indicator is you have to make sure that the policy measures are adequate with the just energy transition and implementation targets, and that they are in alignment with legislation, standards, and processes. And the fourth one is you have to make sure that you have accounted for the justification why a certain just energy transition region is receiving support or not. You might be in a position where you have to decide whether, if you are, let's say, a national level or a state level policymakers, you might have to decide whether you put more financial resources in one region than in another, depending a little bit on the economic context. So for that, you need a good justification. Principle 10 then, please. Principle 10 is about the participative approach to just energy transition plan development. So we have to make sure that the just energy transition plans have accounted for the views of those who are mainly affected by the change of the region. And there we have 5 indicators. One is the right identification of stakeholders and the definition of their roles. The second one is to give to enable the effective public participation in the design, monitoring, and the implementation of the plan. The third one is the time aspect. Make sure that you give people enough time to reflect on proposals for the JET plan or for the JET region. The fourth one is, again, a little bit linked to employment. So make sure that the support of the transition of the regional labor market is there through the explicit inclusion of frameworks of social dialogue. So make sure that you understand what skills are there, what requests and desirable or desirabilities are there, and make sure that you have carried out this social dialogue. And the fifth indicator is about a good communication strategy that really informs everyone who is affected during the entire transition process. And now I'm coming to the last principle. This is about using high quality, independent and objective analyses of challenges and opportunities of implementation of just energy transition process. So this is really about monitoring the process of the just energy transition implementation. The first indicator is really about the quality, objectivity, and appropriateness of indicators you will need for the monitoring process. The second one is about the opportunity to revise energy transition plans during the implementation phase based on a review process. So you have to check on a regular basis, maybe 6 monthly, maybe yearly. You have to check whether you are still on track or whether you might have to even change your direction according to new realities you have identified on the ground based on this review process. And the third one is a rather important one, and I think this is one that will become even more important in the future, because we all know how important data is. So you need a very good data management strategy for the development and as well the implementation of the transition plan. So make sure that you have all the right data to be able to carry out informed decisions. And this is often a challenge because data are often not freely available, for example. So you have to make sure that you have a strategy that is as well inclusive there. And these are the 11 principles. I stopped there. This was a lot of material, but we are happy we have now some time for a Q&A session. And Martin and I are happy to answer any of your questions. Many thanks for your attention.
Thank you, Patrick. Thank you for this very elaborate but detailed, going through the principles. I think we can all definitely learn from that and hear from that. For the Q&A, if there are any questions, we already have one that is directed to Max, but I would like to encourage everyone to make use of the chat or the Q&A channel, post your questions there, and then I can redirect them to the speaker you would like to pose them. Max, we have a question for you. How have the European Commission and European national and subnational governments perceived the WWF assessment tool? There are a couple more questions. So there is a question of how have the principles and recommendations from WWF, have they been taken into account when refining, redrafting the plans, etc.? In which cases, and what are sort of the success factors for them to be taken into account? I'll post the question in the chat because it's quite long, so you can use it in your answer to look at.
Thank you. Yeah, great question. The short answer is generally very positively. I think it helped that it's quite a comprehensive tool. So it's not just looking at, WWF looking at environmental issues within plans. It's obvious that we've got a set of principles and we work with partners to develop these up. And it's the framework itself that's so powerful and that's such a good basis of discussion. And obviously that applies to this the updated tool now as well. In terms of whether it was successful in influencing the redefining during the drafting process and things like that, the answer, again, short answer, is variable. It depended very much on the country. Most of all, we did see some changes, especially on some of our, we saw some of the plans in a way get broader. So if some of them were focused on, if you like, quite a limited range of activities, we saw some plans actually take note of a slightly broadened approach and move into, if you like, more wider, solid, have a slightly broader socioeconomic lens in the final plans. Whether that was just because of our tool or because of other contributions, I wouldn't like to overclaim our influence in that. But I think one of the determining factors is really the quality of the interaction and the skills around the table. And again, for that, it's very important that the tool, if you like, encompasses this broad range of principles and quite detailed indicators. And again, I think the same applies here. In particular, it strengthened some of our existing interactions and alliances. So the trade unions, for example, were very appreciative of the emphasis on workforce issues. It broke some of those silos that we often work in, and we find ourselves having, if you like, more quality conversations because there's this framework and a tool to talk around. So I hope that answers the question.
Great, thank you so much, Max. There are two more questions that have come in. So one asks if you would adjust time intervals for monitoring in more challenging environments, and how you would basically do that to remain efficient, and on which basis or on which criteria. I guess that's to Patrick and Martin.
Yes, certainly, I would say. So that would be the answer. So it depends very much on the context. Maybe I mentioned as an example 6 months or yearly. Maybe 6 months is actually not very realistic. So if you look, for example, at the Ruhr Valley in Germany, you know, it took them about 30 years to transform. So obviously, I think yearly intervals might not be a bad idea. But again, this I would argue this has to be discussed with policymakers on the ground, and you would probably have, if you think about timeframes of more than a decade, you would probably have a kind of short-term review yearly, and maybe every 2 or 3 years you would have a major review of or major monitoring of progress, and hence potentially an adjustment as well of your goals. So definitely yes, yeah.
Perfect, thank you. Somebody asked about if we could share the link to the tool once it's published. We will share that with the material after this webinar. And then there was another question regarding the Principle 8. Do domestic and international funding sources also include the financial sector? For example, commercial banks, institutional investors, etc. And the person is asking because, well, the transition processes require large amounts of capital, which cannot be provided only by public budgets alone. But then, yeah, they were talking about numerous jurisdictions having embarked on implementing sustainable finance strategies to try to promote instruments and methodologies to sort of lower the climate-related risk in the financial sector and kind of frame it as an investment opportunity.
Yes, so my answer to that one would be absolutely. I should have mentioned that actually. But I think, Martin, you wanted to comment on that as well, right?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I can just briefly, and if you look at the principle again, just mention that. I think the emphasis is really on the levels. If you look at the principles, you will see public and private funding first, and the idea is to then include also domestic and international. So I think it's really the levels that are emphasized here. And if you look also in the publication at the indicators and the sub indicators, so to say, so the traffic lights, you will see that you'll see references to commercial banks, but also multilateral development banks. So there you have basically a mix between the financial institutions that will be important along the just energy transition. And I think it's a key issue. And of course, we've been discussing about different aspects of financing the transition also in our previous expert exchange, and we're fully aware that financing the transition and using all tools at our disposal for that is definitely a key question.
Great, thank you, Martin. I'm going to take this last question because we want to have enough time for Julius to also present and for people to ask questions to him. Somebody said that this tool is more for policymakers, but for a more direct project level implementation. How far would the tool could be able to be used here? And is there any follow-up toolkit plan that is more detailed with more detailed principles?
This is a great question. And I would be able to actually answer really, yes, we would like to come up with a much more on the ground toolkit really to actually get into the depth of these different indicators, but we don't have, quite frankly, we don't have the funding for this. So at the moment, really, and that has been mentioned before, the toolkit we presented here today is really about giving a first kind of qualitative assessment of either how a just energy transition plan in principle should be set up, or how a given plan or a presented plan should be maybe revised or checked. But I do acknowledge that we can't give enough information in terms of, for example, implementing JET plans on a kind of project level. So I would love to work on this, but this would be a large endeavor. So we are talking about really a lot of work to be done there. I know that there are some tools out there that offer this, so I would probably suggest to look at these tools. But yeah, we are not in the position to actually prepare such a toolkit, I'm afraid. Thank you.
Thank you as well. And with that, I would like to give over to Julius, who will share a little bit the learnings from South Africa, Indonesia, and Vietnam, the preparation of the JET partnership plans. Please, I think you're going to share your screen yourself, right?
Yes. Hello. Hello, everyone. Good morning or good afternoon. So I'm from IESR. IESR is an Indonesian think tank working on energy transition, basically. So in the past 2-3 years, I think we started to do more research on just energy transition, and we are involved in the JET Secretariat in Indonesia as a part of the technical working group. So yeah, today I will share a bit on an event from an event that we did last year. So it's basically like a workshop that invited like stakeholders from South Africa and Vietnam and Indonesia to share about their respective JET-B experience, and you can all later see the summary in this document. So in principles, I think from all the stakeholders that attended the meeting, we kind of agreed that there are some key elements that we think should be in the just energy transition planning to make it just to like differentiate it from just from only an energy transition plan, and that's like these 3 aspects: the social justice, financing, and impacts. So social justice will involve more on the human rights and participation, and also equity of benefits and so on. And then we also see that during the workshop that finance is a big issue in the just energy transition in all the 3 countries. We talk about some of we talk about like that the financing is needed for both like transitioning away from fossil fuel and transitioning into the renewable energy and the low carbon economy. And also we talk like that the investment climate is needed to attract more financing and stuff. So we cannot rely on only public finance, but private finance is also needed. That's why we need supporting investment climate that's often not available in this at the time. And then we talk about what the impacts of the just energy transition. It should already be in the plan. How the climate impacts, how the emission reduction will happen, and also the environmental impacts like the air pollution and how the transition will affect like water quality and so on, and also the economic impact on the regions that is deeply dependent on fossil fuels, for example. And I think that's basically quite similar with what has been presented before by Patrick and Max. And then I will give a deeper example from what has been happening in Indonesia's JETP process. So I think the end of last year, I think around October or November, finally the Indonesian JETP has released the investment plan and all the details of the program. So one of the big thing I think is how it will be governed, and this is very interesting because like from this structure in the left, we can see that there is not so much involvement of stakeholders from the civil society, for example, or from academia, or they are like more focused on the government institutions, financing institutions, and some of the energy companies in the official structure, although they recognize that the other stakeholders like think tanks and civil society workers and so on are also important stakeholders that needs to be engaged and consulted during the process and the implementation. And then another point that I would like to raise here is this part with the red box. So basically when this structure is launched, the government also issued a decree to establish the National Energy Transition Task Force that now is like have the role of directing this the whole just energy transition in Indonesia, so JETP and other stuff. And I think there has been some improvement, because if we see into this energy transition task force, there are much more ministries that are involved in the team. So it involves like manpower ministries or social ministries, ministries on gender equality and so on. So it's an improvement from the experience that we saw during the JETP processes, because during the JETP processes, the other those ministries that are not like really involved in energy planning has not been really engaged basically, but now they have access to this energy transition planning processes. And then I would like to continue to the other part of the investment plan, which is a financing aspects that we can see here. This is like the allocation of the public funds that is already made in the investment plan. And yeah, we can see here that like basically it mainly focuses on the investment on the infrastructure, whether it is renewable energy or the grid. But like for the just transition part itself, it's only like 300 something million US dollars compared to the total public fund of around 10 billion. So it's a very minuscule amount of fund that is already allocated, but and it's become a concern for many of the civil society that this will need to be increased later, especially if we want to address also like the economic diversification and economic transformation in the fossil fuel dependent regions. Because this amount of money, I think the investment plan also says that this is only sufficient for like doing the assessment and stuff, but it's not. It won't be used for like developing a new economic sector or whatever. And last part, I would like to give a bit of comment to the just energy transition tools that I think is an interesting one, because the tool shows us like how the just energy transition plan ideally be done with the green lights. Basically shows the ideal conditions with like everything is perfect and so on. But I think, I don't know, I have like a bit of concern with the yellow thing, because I haven't like really do the assessment using these tools like for the whole JETP plan, but I guess like for most of the indicators we will get low ratings, and it's kind of I don't know, because like some people will say, okay, it's not too bad to get yellow, and because we kind of cover everything, kind of recognize everything that okay, the gender inequalities exist and we need to do something about it, but there is no concrete plan and so on. So, and I don't think that it would be really useful to just recognize it without any concrete plan. And it relates also to the next issue that I would like to raise, that in the end the most important thing is the implementation of this plan. Like, okay, we can have like very nice plan, it sounds good, but in the end it all depends on the implementation. And like in Indonesia, we know that some of the environmental and social safeguards exist in the law basically, but it is not implemented quite well. So, and it's becoming an issue all the time when we are developing energy infrastructure and so on. So yeah, I think this is like a thing that might be discussed later on, like how this all nice, even if we have green on all this energy transition planning, how it will translate to reality. I think that covers like everything. And thank you for the opportunity to share.
Thank you so much, Julius. And I see we already have a question. Very interesting what you said about most of the indicators being yellow, because if we remember back the EU tool, we also saw that a lot of the principles were actually yellow, which means it's not quite that bad, but also not quite there yet. And Patrick, you have a question.
No, I just wanted to reply to Julia's last comment, if that's okay. I think it's an important one and an absolutely valid one as well. I think we have to make very clear, and I think we did that in the document as well, that we demonstrate what the need of this assessment tool as well. You know, what are the boundaries? What can we offer with this tool? And I think really, you know, given that we are mainly talking about qualitative indicators, it is a non-binding tool, so it is really just a kind of support system really for policymakers. And I think one of the main, to me at least, how I understand as well the implementation process, planning and implementation process, how that usually develops. I think one of the main advantages of this tool really is that it gives policymakers the entire array of aspects they should look at. Because I think depending on their personal background, on the background of that team that is developing and deciding maybe as well on the implementation plans, they will be sort of blind on certain aspects. And I think one of the key the key advantages of the tool really is that it offers a whole array of aspects that should be covered. And I think that in itself is already a very important aspect. And then I agree that, as you could as well see from exactly from like you said, Julius, what Max presented, there will be a lot of yellow at the end. We decided, and I should make that as well, I should stress that we decided as well against this scorecard approach, right? So we have a traffic light approach, but we don't have a scorecard approach. So I think obviously we have to make sure, and I think again that has been addressed in the document as well, that every policymaker should aim for a green, but as soon as we see things are actually moving from red towards yellow, then this is already a very good step into the right direction. I think this is something that should be acknowledged as well. So for that, I think it is important, and it is sort of sufficient to a certain extent, at least, that maybe at the beginning the jet energy transition plan is more in the kind of yellow area, but obviously the ideal is always the green, and it should be made clear that if you go through the implementation process as well, there's still room really to move from yellow to green as well. So, and to make sure that through monitoring and evaluation as well, that you try to really aim for the better during the implementation process. But there is certainly a limitation, sorry. Yeah.
Thank you, Patrick, for these additional comments. So what I take from this is strive for green, yellow, well, fair enough, and really avoid red. One question maybe before we close to Julius. So we are now sort of navigating the trade-offs, like, so we stay in yellow, there is room for improvement, avoid the red, and so on. But what trade-offs do you think policymakers really face in practice when they draft and then also implement the transition plans, maybe also in relation to the yellow and green areas?
Sorry, I don't really get the question. Can you repeat, please?
Yes. What are the trade-offs that you see policymakers facing in practice when they draft and then also implement the JET plan? So especially from your experience from Indonesia.
Well, I think it's not yet implemented. The JET thing is just like released last year, and actually they are planning to release like the second version later this year, and they are like adding new working groups and stuff. So it's a really developing thing. I think the major trade-offs is what I see. It's about the finance, mainly the financing part, because like there is like I don't know, like a conflicting interest between like the government and the IPGs, and also like the defense on how everything should be, or what's the pathway, the pathway that we need to go through. For example, like initially, the idea is to close a lot of coal power plants and replacing it with renewable energy. And then during the process, there are also many conflicting interests, like from the power company and also from the funder and the financing institutions. And in the end, we decided to, okay, then we just close a few of them. We will close a few of them if we have the money, or if there is a financing institution that want to invest in it. And the rest, we will do co-firings with biomass and stuff. So yeah, I think in the end, it really goes into the availability of the funding. And yeah.
Thank you. I'm sure that a lot of listeners can relate to the money being a big task, a big issue at hand. So we're at the end of our expert exchange now. I'd like to thank all the speakers for your contributions, and I would invite everybody to check out the links that my colleague Adriana has now posted in the chat, and then also the links that have been posted by Max and by Martin previously. We will bring all these presentations and the recording also. We will send that out to you after the meeting. So keep an eye out for that. And then, of course, we invite you to sign up to our newsletter and to also visit our Knowledge Hub, because you'll find more information on a variety of different just energy transition topics there. And with that, have a great day, have a great evening, and hope to see you at the next expert exchange.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Many
Thank you, everyone.
thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.